Hello, everyone. Hope you are having a fantastic Thursday evening. Audio is working. Sorry, I forgot to mute my phone. It's day 4th of the Dan Triplett trial. A busy day. We'll get to that here in a second, but it's always good to have your phone because off of silent in the volume, you can't have your phones in court, and it's a few phones have gone off, and boy, when they go off, everyone turns and looks because you're not supposed to do that in court. A few people got caught, but it tends to happen. You come back from lunch and you forget to mute that. Of course, before I even leave the house, it's on my mind to mute my phone before I go into the courtroom. Anyway, well, I hope everyone, again, is having a great Thursday. It was a crazy day in court. And there's a lot of moving parts with this day. And so I'm hopefully will try to, at the end of this, if your head's hurting and confused and it's all over the place, that's how I felt after today's trials. So it was just a little bit of a crazy day, the 4th day. And before we go any further, this is my disclaimer for all you 14 jurors. There's 12 jurors and there's 2 alternate jurors. And you guys are not supposed to be watching this podcast. The judge tells you multiple times every day. So this is where you shouldn't be at anyway. But if you are, turn it off now because you're not supposed to be doing this. You can watch all these replays sometime next week when you guys are done and all that stuff. So disclaimer, don't go any further. Don't watch anything of this deal as we will talk about all the witnesses that took the stand today, including Dan Triplett. I'll tell you kind of how a little reaction when his name was mentioned today. If you have any comments, please leave comments. If you have questions, leave those in the comments as well. There's a lot of stuff I'll go over, and if I go too fast or don't go into far depth, let me know, and we can look at those. So appreciate all the questions. If you're watching replay, you can leave a comment on the video as well. A lot of people have done that, and I've been able to go through some of those and reply to those questions. So appreciate everyone checking this out the third day. Of course, it all started on Monday with jury selection, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, here we are on Thursday. But each day, the gallery continues to get a little bit bigger every day. The Mack family, Triplett family, but more people are starting to come in and take a part of this, including several OSBI agents are in the gallery as they were a part of the search warrant and the investigation. A couple of police officers from the Guthrie Police Department who've already testified. Now they can be in there because they after they go from the witness chair out, they can obviously watch. And so a little bit bigger of a crowd today. And just so you know, the state rest and the defense rest. And come next week, it's time for jury instructions, closing arguments, and then jury deliberation. So we should have an answer on this trial by Tuesday. One thing I haven't mentioned here on this deal, remember 12 jurors, and if all 12 come back and agree of guilty or not guilty, then that's what it is. If it's 11-1, 10-2, 9-3, that is considered a hung jury. And Dan Triplett goes back to the county jail and awaits a new hearing, a new jury trial, a new jury, a new all that stuff. So if you know, a lot of people going into this think Dan Triplett is guilty. Of course, that's the great thing about this trial. He's innocent until proven guilty. But if there's that one juror who either way, if they believe him or not believe him, but if it's 11-1, it's a hung jury. He goes back to the jail and repeats this court process, including possibly a new trial. Kylie Z, wow, he took the stand. Can't wait to hear the details. This trial is moving along really fast. You're exactly right, Kylie. It has gone extremely fast. I thought jury selection would take 2 days. It took 1 day, all day on Monday. There's been 12, 16 or 17 witnesses, and they've all gone through already. So Yeah, it has gone really, really fast. And Judge Corley kind of joked with the jurors today that we can stay till midnight or 1, but it probably wouldn't be good. He was joking because they got to talk about jury instructions, what can and cannot be mentioned in the jury instructions, how it's worded. It's a back and forth process between the attorneys, and then you have closing arguments. Obviously, the attorneys need time to pile everything together over this 4-day period to really bring home their closing arguments. And then it will be given to the jurors, who will go upstairs on the third floor of the courthouse, and we'll discuss this trial back and forth and come back with a verdict or a decision of some sort. Expect all that to happen Tuesday. I think once they go up, they can take as long as they want. I would think Tuesday would be enough, but we'll see if it doesn't go into Wednesday. But I know judges love to keep the jurors together as long as possible. Even when they disagree, they give them a couple more hours to think about the decision. So we'll see how that plays out on Tuesday. And the reason why it is Tuesday, just a reminder, the courthouse is closed on Friday because of 89ers. And then Judge Corley has a court docket on Monday. It's one of his big dockets of the month. And so that he couldn't just let a whole bunch of people go. So it was easier to delay the trial by 1 day. Okay, so we will get to the start of this day. It started, remember, day 3 ended with OSBI Special Agent Kevin Woodward on the stand. Ran out of time, and so it was cross-examination today. Dan Triplett's attorney, Ronald Wallace, had that. It was a very short cross, and all the witnesses, there's either been no cross-examination by Triplett's attorney, and if there has been, it's been very, very little discussion of questions. It might be one question. And it makes a little bit more sense why that happened today. More on that here in a little bit. So Wallace asked about the document search. That's the first question in this 8-minute discussion between Agent Woodward and Wallace. Document search, first to enter, asked about paperwork. Woodward said he was not present for the gun search. He was there for the document search. Document search took place on October 13th. They talked about the interview at the Guthrie Police Department and the technique that Bruning and Woodward did lie. And that's an accepted practice in an interviewing process there. The discussion, if you remember, law enforcement officers have had issues in the past with Brent Mack. He's had issues with a customer, and Brent Mack has an attitude, has a loud mouth. He's been a criminal all of his life. This is just Wallace kind of bringing this back up, and it obviously makes sense here a little bit why he's bringing up all the criminal history and his attitude and all that stuff. It's something about swinging on Brent Mack. I don't believe that was that might have been a lie. Present with Woodward was present when 2 receipts were found in the driver's side of Brent Mack's or Dan Triplett's truck. So really not a whole lot of back and forth that was learned there, but that's how it started. The first witness of the day, witness number 11 total in this case, was the medical examiner, Mark Harrison, and he is very qualified to be a medical examiner. I didn't write him all down, but his resume is unbelievable. But he has an extensive medical background for many, many years. And this is J.R. Kokla, the Logan County Assistant District Attorney, who continues to do a great job with this case. Laura Austin Thomas, the District Attorney, was right next to him the entire day as well, and Kevin Woodward at the table as well. The medical examiner, Mark Harrison, said there was a substantial amount of dirt when the bag was opened. So Brent Mack's body was recovered on September 21st, and then the next day, the medical examiner takes a look at the body bag that was taken to the medical examiner's office in Oklahoma City. They noticed a lot of dirt when the bag was open. The medical examiner was given advance notice that he was aware of that the victim Mack was found in a hole, found under septic tank. They did a full autopsy and determined the cause of death the manner of death was a homicide. Single gunshot wound in the left chest cavity with bullet. And so they're showing photos of the medical examiners taking photos of a variety of things. We'll go over those here in just a second. But the one thing that I took from that, so they take the pictures and then each juror looks at it, passes it on, look at the next one, pass it on. And then Triplett's attorneys wanted to look at that. And they brought all the photos over to the defense table, and Dan Triplett was watching every photo. He was paying close attention to every single photo that his attorney was taking at. He was interested in what those photos looked like. Dan Triplett looking at photos. He kind of propped up to kind of look at that. I wrote that in my notes. Exhibit 78 was the overhead of the boots and jeans in the dirt in the blue body bag. Exhibit 80, picture number 80, was overhead with 3 scales kind of measuring everything out. Exhibit 82 was his boots were removed. Exhibit 85 was pants removed with wallet, which had IDs, also had some socks, some coins, and a pocket knife. Exhibit 86 was overhead of 4 single bills, dollar bills. Exhibit 87 was some cards, a wallet ID. Exhibit 90 showed some bugs on Brent Mack's hands. Exhibit 88 was a full body front view, and there was a metallic region in the left chest. That would have been the bullet. And the medical examiner said it was 0.357 inches and 157.6 grams, how heavy it was. Exhibit 91, bullet removed from the body. Again, I wrote down Dan Triplett looking closely at the photos at the defense table. The medical examiner said the hole was in his left back, and it was 16 inches down from his head, so head down to 16 inches, and then 4 inches on the left side. So 16 inches from his head, top of his head, 4 inches to the left side is where that bullet was found. Hole in the back, 16 inches down. Left lung, lower portion of left lung went through 2 ribs. It hit the 4th rib on the left side and fractured it. The medical examiner said the appearance of the skin was decomposing. It had color changes in the skin to a blackish greenish, which is a classic decomposing color that the medical examiner said. Did not find any other injuries on Brent Mack. No other struggles. Now, he did say with the decomposing a little bit, it would be harder to see if there was any bruising or other type of marks. But with that being said, there were no other injuries found on Brent Mack. Again, this was a full autopsy. The doctor said there's a slight amount of calcium blockage, if you will, in the heart, but nothing too much. The spleen was small for his age. And they did a toxicology of Brent Mack's liver, and there were no drugs in that liver. And they usually like to test other organs for drugs and alcohol, but due to the decomposing of the body, it wasn't there. They said the best part to do that is in the legs. Kind of learned that today, did not know that. This is important. I wrote it down. I didn't think it was important, but that's why I'm trying to write everything down, because you never know what it's going to come back to, and I'm glad I did after this afternoon went down. But the medical examiner said that the height of Brent Mack was 76 inches, so that's about 6'4". Remember that a little bit later on. That will come up a whole bunch. And the weight of Brent Mack was 135 pounds, but the doctor said a lot of water weight was gone, so he probably weighed more than that before he was killed. The medical examiner said it was difficult to say on a time range of death, so no time was given. There was no other injuries. Brain did not see any evidence of trauma, no indication of body of a physical altercation. And then again, how Brent Mack died was ruled gunshot to the back. Cross-examination. So now Triplett's attorney comes and asks a few questions. He asked, what facts did the medical examiner have before? He's just, again, said buried bodies, all the information. And then Mack's attorney said, are all gunshot wounds ruled homicide? And the medical examiner said, the doctor said, no, not all gunshot wounds are homicides. And he mentioned suicides and accidental shootings. Just a reminder, it was entry 16 inches from the top of the head, 4 inches left of the midline. There was no gunpowder or on the body. If it was, it could have been decomposed at that time. But the range of fire distance, unknown, maybe 18, 24 inches, but it was unknown. And they were talking about the position of the bullet where it went slightly upward. And there was a little bit of discussion on that, but the projection of the bullet was slightly upward. So in the back and then up a little bit into the lung chest cavity area. And kind of like if a body was bent over was a reason why that could have happened. All right, redirect, not much there. Recross, I thought this was kind of weird. Dan Triplett's attorney asked, did Brent Mack die instantly? Would a gunshot wound to the back, fractured rib, into the left chest, did he die instantly? And I don't know why he would ask that, but I'm sure there's a reason above my pay grade. But the doctor said, Brent Mack could have survived for a small time. Some could die instantly. Some have lived a little while with that injury. And that was kind of his one question and done on a recross. Okay, so hopefully that was witness 11. All right, we'll move on to witness number 12. I don't see anything right off, so we'll continue on as far as no question. How long after Mack went in the hole did Triplett start operating the machine? That was discussed a little bit today. It was also discussed yesterday. But so comes out of the hole and almost, I don't know, a minute or two maybe is how fast that he went back to operating the machine. It happened about 6:40 on the time frame. And the project was completed because it was installed the next day. I would say it'd get dark at 8:15, 8:30. So he was able to finish the job in that amount of time. All right, witness number 12 was Alan Salmon. He is the OSBI Forensic Video Analysis. And once again, he's been doing law enforcement for 44 years. He's been a forensic video analyst for 18 years. He is one of 54 video analysts in the world. He's one of 33 in the U.S. So I just thought that was interesting to put there. He says he does about 130 to 215 cases on average per year. This is the guy that Kevin Woodward, the OSBI agent, sent the video to the rugs, the construction company that had the camera number 4 that just happened to be pointing toward his driveway. But in the distance was where the septic tank was being installed. And this video was a big part of this afternoon's evidence. And we'll be talking plenty about that here in just a little bit. And they kind of got into the technical stuff. There really wasn't a whole bunch here. It was back and forth on pixels and 720 to 1080. By the way, this is 1080 by 60 frames. They talked about 4K. They talked about 8K. And it was just a bunch of back and forth conversation on some technology. The main thing that the state that nothing was changed. People weren't turned around. It was just basically the very long video was cropped down to a 10-minute span. One part was enhanced, And so that's basically what this evidence was here. And this guy is a specialist, but anyway, not a whole lot there. I'm going to read my note, very few notes on here. I'm going to make sure playing videos that discuss technology. Stop before the shot. Okay, yeah, so that was just evidence there. Witness number 13. Witness number 13 by the state was the property owner in Mulhall, the scene, the septic tank installation. The property owner, there's two of them. There's a brother and a sister. And the first one to take the stand was the sister, who was actually building a house on that property. She bought property from her parents, who lived a quarter of a mile to the east. Her and her brother walk. And I'll fast forward here a little bit for you. So in the video, we see Brent Mack go into the hole. 40 minutes later, this is not shown in the video, but through evidence, 40 minutes later, the sister and brother come up to the hole for an inspection and to pay Dan Triplett. And this is how that went. Building a property on the house. Dan Triplett was the contractor. After researching, she looked at various people to install the septic tank, went with Dan Triplett. They met on September 15th, and they met at the land in a white pickup, large truck with a trailer. Sharon Triplett was with Dan Triplett, but stayed in the truck as they talked. A down payment with a receipt, which is Exhibit 127. Remember, there was a receipt for this job in one truck at Dan Triplett's house and another receipt in the other. So a down payment was made, which is one receipt in one truck. And I'll fast forward here a little bit. When she left, when they came to install it, wrote another check to be paid in full, and that was in another truck. So that's why there's two receipts, a down payment in one truck receipt and a full payment receipt in another truck. So a little heads up on that one. They came to check on the property on September 20th, again, about 40 minutes after Brent Mack went into the hole. It was a little after 6 o'clock. They walked to the tank. Dan Triplett, coming out of the hole with ladder, it looked completed. The hole looked completed. Looked into the hole, saw nothing but dirt. There were no tools. It was flat land. She said she wanted to pay in full because she had to work tomorrow and did not want to go try to find Dan Triplett. He was at the scene. Let me pay you and move on. Paid in cash. It was a visit that was not scheduled, so just came up there. And when they did, the lady said that Dan Triplett appeared irritated. This is 40 minutes after Brent Mack goes in. He's very irritated. Was not sure why. She had no idea why. Did not seem to register to him as she wanted to pay. So she said, "Hey, I'm here to pay you." And she said he's not really paying attention to what she's telling him. In fact, Dan Triplett conducted the work while she watched them. He never mentioned payment. They were there more than 15 to 30 minutes. They spoke again. And she says, "We would like to pay you." So he walked over to the driver's door of his truck, paid with a cash receipt, which is Exhibit 128. She testified that she did not see anybody but Dan Triplett. She said that Dan Triplett said his help was not there that day. And that's one of many, many lies. And all this will come together when Dan Triplett takes the stand. It gets a lot of moving parts here in a little bit. So this lady, very nice lady, by the way, she did a good job you can tell she's real shy, but she did a really good job on the stand. She was contacted by police the next day. She signed a consent to search form, which was Exhibit 120. And after the scene is left and the septic tank has been out, Mack's body has been recovered and taken to a medical examiner's office. The septic tank is reinstalled. And it was reinstalled by red dirt. I asked the one sitting next to me, and I didn't want to ask, but I wonder if she had to pay for that to be put back in, or who would have paid for that. Very side note, but it's just how my brain worked. I was like, you would hate to have to pay for 2 installations, especially when one is taken up. But again, just kind of weird thought for me. But anyway, she said Dan Triplett was really, quote, uneasy and off. She used those exact words, uneasy and off. And she said she was treated disrespectful and unwanted. Disrespectful and unwanted were her words, put in quotes. Cross-examination, Triplett's turn to talk to the property owner. Again, not much. She said they took 10, 15 minutes to walk to the site. Dan Triplett came out on a ladder. There was no tools seen in the hole. It was a hot day. Dan Triplett seemed irritated, appeared occupied, and Wallace said, did Dan Triplett ever ask you to leave? And she said, no, he never asked us to leave. Wrote the receipt and was not friendly, is what she said. Witness number 14 is her brother, and he did a great job on the stand as well. He seemed a little bit more comfortable. Very nice gentleman. Witness number 14, the brother of the 2 siblings, and he was a little bit more descriptive in Dan Triplett's demeanor that day. They, again, walked a quarter mile on September 20th, went to the site. She hired Dan Triplett. He had never met Dan Triplett before. They walked up about 6:15, 6:30 at night. He said Dan Triplett climbing out of the hole and, quote, surprised to see us. He responded, quote, vaguely, and walked away. And he said, quote, doesn't seem happy to see us. Short, walked away. He kind of hung back. Dan Triplett went back to work on the gravel. And then the brother said, this is awkward. Let's pay him and leave. He does not seem happy. He's ignoring us. Went to truck to get paperwork, but went to work right after that. He goes on to say there's clear signals he did not want us there. He looked in the hole, saw flat earth. So it was a flat earth. Remember, it's important for a septic tank to be flat, and that's what they saw. And they got it right up to the hole, right up to the edge, and looked in. And they said it looked like to be 7 to 8 feet. But a little bit later on, we'll learn that it's 6 feet. But if you're just eyeballing, it's pretty close. The brother kind of brought up that he felt a little bit of a safety concern being at that site. And he mentioned that Dan Triplett had dumped some gravel on the lateral lines, and that he had to move his sister so she would not get hit by the bucket, by the tractor. He said tractor. And so he just kind of left her, and he said, hey, can we leave? I'm not comfortable here. Those were his words exactly. Can we leave? I'm not comfortable. Dan Triplett, he says Dan Triplett told him the help never arrived, said that multiple times voluntarily, and they walked home. They walked back, and they were talking and saying it was awkward and weird, and maybe his help didn't show up. That's the talk there. Cross-examination said they saw the ladder, kind of repeated his testimony that he had earlier. He did not know Dan Triplett, and the Triplett's attorney, Wallace, asked, did you know his personality? Obviously, he did not know his personality, just kind of saying that's maybe how he is, and that the ladder lines were to the west. At that point, after that witness, the state rests their case at 11:17, and it was lunchtime, and I went to the studio in downtown Guthrie and kind of did about a 15, 20-minute quick update of what was going on. At that time, I said I thought the state did a tremendous job, but I still didn't have that motive. What was the motive behind all this? That was my one question that I didn't have, but again, that's a long case. There was parts of a motive, but it was never really put together. It comes out a little bit more in the afternoon. I think it will probably come out in closing arguments as well. So go to lunch, did that quick thing, had a quick bite to eat. And so when the state rests, it was now the time for Ronald Wallace, the attorney for Dan Triplett, to have an opening statement. Remember, at the beginning, after jury selection, there's an opening statement by the state, and very rarely has this happened. It happened in this one. The defense reserved their opening statement, and now with the state rest, we've seen all this evidence, 3 days of evidence, 2.5 days of evidence, and now Ronald Wallace makes his opening statement. It was 7 minutes, 11:18 to 11:25. So we did not take lunch. I apologize. So the state rests at 11:17, and then at 11:18 was opening statement, and which is opening statement is kind of a foundation of what you're going to talk about your case. This is the foundation, and we're going to dissect these parts here with my witnesses. And this is what he said. Dan Triplett, lifelong resident, raised on Triplett, a family salutatorian of Guthrie High School. He had an associate's degree at Oklahoma State University. Married Sharon Triplett, a CPA. Has 3 daughters and 2 grandkids. It's a very tight family, Wallace said, with a good reputation around town. Dan Triplett, no mental health issues. Long-standing business, 1986, I believe. He hired Brent Mack, in that Dan Triplett had a hard time keeping help with his business because it's very labor-heavy, out in the elements, cold, hot, rain, all that good stuff. So it's hard to keep employees. He tried to help Brent Mack, he says, a place to live, lived in a couple of places, including above a downtown business where the CPA business is at. But he also goes on to say Brent Mack had a history. He had a temper. He was a hothead. Brent Mack became disgruntled and offering a place to stay for free in the downtown building. He was eventually said you can't be there anymore. Dan Triplett offered Brent Mack a place with the trailer. Brent Mack had issues with a previous customer, and I kind of got a time frame on that because I don't think it was said. But so the Mulhall case, septic tank, was September 20th. The one in Crescent, September 8th. 2 weeks before September 8th, so late August, is when it was reported that Brent Mack had a heated argument with one of Dan Triplett's customers. They were working hot, 7 o'clock at the Crescent location. Dan Triplett said he was finally done with Brent Mack and that he's going to fire him. Pulled a pistol. He said Brent Mack pulled a pistol. There was a fight. That Dan Triplett took the gun away. There was a fight over the gun. Dan Triplett panicked, Dan Triplett panicked when he shot. He admitted he shot in self-defense and that he lied to the police. He lied multiple times to the police officers, and the lies just kept getting deeper and deeper, and that he acted in self-defense from a bigger person. And then that's how we went to lunch. So now we understand where the defense is coming. They are going to claim that Dan Triplett shot and killed Brent Mack in self-defense. So we have the entire lunch hour to think about. The jurors had an entire lunch break to think about that. Court started back up at 1:15. We all sit down and we're all waiting for to begin, and Judge Corley comes in and says, we last left with opening statements. Defense, you now call your first witness. And Ronald Wallace says, the defense calls Daniel Joseph Triplett to the stand. And it was what? Very rarely do you ever see the person on trial testify. It does happen, but not very often. And there's times in trials that you go, man, I wish they would get up there and talk, which is, lawyers really don't like that. But you're like, man, can they please get up there? And he obviously said that. And of course, I got up from my seat, my front row seat, went outside into the hallway and snapped a photo through the window. And this was the photo of Dan Triplett on the stand. And Dan Triplett was on the stand for multiple hours today. So I would say about 1:15 to, about 4 o'clock, 4:30 maybe, around 4 o'clock perhaps. Maybe I wrote it down. But so the note taking started. I was writing so fast. I was trying to keep up. I hope I kept up. I have not gone through these notes. You will hear them for the first time as I read them. And it might be a little confusing because during the questioning, not so much with his attorney, but when J.R. Cockla got up there, there was a lot of back and forth, and they kept jumping topics, discussions, different areas. I think that was a strategy by the district attorney's office to kind of jump around and try to get Dan Triplett to say the same answers or not the same answers. It's just the way I felt. I don't know if that's true or not, but it just kind of felt like, let's go back to this again and see if he repeats the same story. It was back and forth. So as I started this, if it's very confusing, I apologize. There's a lot of moving parts, and I'll just give a little bit of commentary here. Let me hold on that commentary. Let me get there first. So Dan Triplett from the stand says, went to grade school in Guthrie, valedictorian at Guthrie High School, degree at OSU, married to Sharon Triplett. They met in high school. 3 daughters, 2 grandkids, started his construction business, which is storm shelters and septic tanks. Named their address, lived prior on Triplett Road. He said, just kind of confirming, no mental health issues. They've had the business since 1986, Triplett Backhoe LLC, over 1,000 installations. He once served on the Guthrie City Council. He also ran for state legislature and lost. I did not know about the state legislature part, but did know he was a Guthrie City Council member. Brent Mack, and I think that was I would have to look up to be exactly what it was, but it was a few decades back. Brent Mack was an employee. He met him when he was looking for somebody else in 2019. Dan Triplett pulled up looking for somebody. Brent Mack said he's in jail. And then that's how they kind of introduced each other. And he said, hey, I'll go work for you. He was paid $10 an hour. After a year, Brent Mack was paid $11 an hour. And he only wanted to work for cash. And at the time, Dan Triplett said Brent Mack was living in his car in the alley. He gave him a place to live up above the business on Oklahoma at no cost. Above Sharon Triplett's office. Brent Mack was a general laborer, a shovel hand, if you will. And that he knows the steps to install a septic tank. Brent Mack wanted to leave early, and it was hot on that September 7th day in Crescent. Remember, the property owner showed up to just kind of see how progress. He never saw any physical altercation between Brent Mack and Daniel Triplett, but remember, he said there was some tension there. They were hot. You can see the sweat going through their clothing, and Brent Mack told him he wanted to go home. He was ready to go home. While all this is going on, Dan Triplett continues to work. That comes up a little bit here again. Dan Triplett said he talked to the property owner in the Mulhall location on the 15th. Remember, met on the 15th. The septic tank was ordered on the 17th, and obviously dropped off at the 20th and installed on the 21st. September 20th was an accurate date. Dan Triplett confirmed that. Started around 11 a.m. They said they got a start late in the day. Not sure why. It went to 7 o'clock or dusk time. And when both siblings walked up, so he confirmed. And that's important because, not that it matters until the big news comes out here in a second, but, on the video, you can't see Dan Triplett's face. I mean, it's several hundred yards away. You can't see his face, but you have two people who talked to Dan Triplett who was working at the same time. So that puts obviously Dan Triplett there, but that's obviously not a big deal because we know he was there. But there were some people like, well, you don't see his face on the camera, so it might not be him, but it was him because obviously the siblings walked up and had a conversation, and he paid for it and had a receipt in his truck that was found in a search document. It was never offered up, but a search document that comes up a little bit later on as well. They talked about determine where the tank goes, did the ladder lines first, installed those up to about 5:30. Started digging about 6 o'clock, the septic tank. And it takes anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour and a half to do that. Brent Mack was there. The tank was 6 to 6.5 foot for the tank. They said it was 6 foot there most of the time. Ladder lines are about 18 to 30 inches, 2 feet down. Both in the hole. On the clock, on the video that shows Brent Mack going into the hole and them working, obviously, as well. The time of the shot was reported at 6:39. Dan Triplett is on the right. Brent Mack is on the left of the video. Stepped down 2 feet below. He went down right there. And Daniel Triplett said he jumped down. Quote, he jumped down. There's a ladder in the septic tank. And Dan Triplett says he jumped down. Did not take the ladder. He jumped down. Now, this is his attorney and him talking. So a lot of this is going to be brought up by the district attorney's office here in a little bit. He said he jumped down. Instead of the ladder, he dropped down in the hole. He's moving around the hole. He says, do you go in the hole? Yes, to help level the hole. And this is where Dan Triplett starts talking a little fast, and I'm writing down as fast as I can, but this will come a little bit more clear when the district attorney's office goes a little bit of a play-by-play. So if it's a little confusing right now, I apologize, but it'll clear out here in a second. He was hollering, talking about Brent Mack, that he was ready to go home. And then Dan Triplett said, this is going to be your last day. And that's when he said, Brent Mack pulled a pistol out of his left pocket. He says, you're not going to leave me homeless. He tried to shoot me. Okay, so he's talking really fast. I will go ahead and fast forward here a little bit. I might have to repeat myself later. So this is what Dan Triplett said, and this might have been on cross-examination. So just bear with me. I want to give you the facts before it kind of gets confusing. So Daniel Triplett says that Brent Mack jumped into the hole. On the video, you can see Brent Mack go down. Okay, was he shot there? Did he jump there? That's what we're trying to figure out. In that Dan Triplett went down the ladder. So now they're inside the hole. Video is a distance away, and there's dirt on one side. So it's kind of clear over here, the dirt that was scooped up from the backhoe. So there's a mound of dirt in front of maybe half of the hole. Dan Triplett says they go down there, and Brent Mack is, you're not going to leave me homeless. There's other things that he said that will come back up later. So Daniel Triplett says he reached in his left pocket, pulled a gun out, and said, you're not leaving homeless. And Dan Triplett said that he immediately knocked his hand down, and then that one bullet went off. And then he said both their hands, so there's 4 hands above their head, and 2 more bullets go off. And then Dan Triplett said he used his shoulder to hit Brent Mack's shoulder to turn around and get the gun, and that's when he said he shot Brent Mack. Okay, more details here in just a second. I just want to get that part out there. And it would be broken down a little bit easier here in a few moments. He said Dan Triplett said he pulled the trigger and watched briefly before Brent Mack went down. Collapsed, died. He said about 5 seconds. He said he was down there for less than a minute. Dan Triplett said, I freaked out. I physically got out. I was in shock. Tried to help. He tried to kill me. He tried to kill me, he said. Then Daniel Triplett said he dug a hole and covered him up. He goes, he says, Dan Triplett says, I regret it. We wouldn't be here if I called the sheriff. He said, not guilty of murder, but self-defense. I did not murder him. He said, I'm not denying the second charge of which is desecration of a body. And then his attorney asked him about lying to the police. I said, part of it, he said, lie to all of them. In my mind, that would have happened if it did occur. So what he's saying is, if I did shoot and kill him, this is how it would occur with all the lies and all that stuff. Okay, so there's a lot of all this stuff right there. So it kind of breaks down a little bit here. Now it's time for cross-examination. This is the main event, if you will. J.R. Kalka, district attorney, and Daniel Triplett. They go after this for over an hour, almost a couple hours probably. Questioning starts off with, how tall are you, Dan Triplett? He says 6 foot. He said, how tall is Brent Mack? And he says, no idea. Remember, the medical examiners, the doctor from the ME said he was 6'4". 6'4". Dan Triplett, how much do you weigh? He said 170 pounds. How much do you think Brent Mack weighed? He said, I have no idea. Dan Triplett was asked, was he in good shape? As far as Brent Mack being in good shape, he said yes. Questioning, when did the ladder go down in the hole? And it was kind of back and forth. It was rewind several times. Judge Corey said, okay, that's enough rewinding. They couldn't really tell when the ladder was in the hole, but it was in the hole, obviously before Brent Mack went down in that hole for the last time. Brent Mack had after he jumped. So the septic tank was to be 6 feet, was dug down 6 feet. So remember, Brent Mack is 6'4", so his head would be a little bit above the ground. In the video, you never see Brent Mack in the ground. Like if he's standing, you don't even see Dan Triplett, who's right at 6 foot. You don't see any of that in the video. Remember, there are mounds of dirt on one side of that hole. Dan Triplett said he jumped straight down in the hole. Dan Triplett had no idea how old Brent Mack was. Asked him if he ever jumped in and out of a hole before. He said a couple of times. Why? And he was asked. Dan Triplett was asked, "Why jump or climb?" He says, "No idea." And Dan Triplett said majority of the time, Dan Triplett used the ladder to get up there. No reason why Brent Mack would jump. Dan Triplett said he's never been in a physical fight with anybody in life, and he said with Brent Mack as well. He was asked, did Brent Mack ever threaten you? Dan Triplett said no, but other people. More information, helping out, $11 an hour, gave him a house to live, and then also a trailer that Dan Triplett owned, and then he said he had sold it to a, quote, Chinaman, but they never came and got the trailer, so Dan Triplett offered the Brent Mack to stay there. It had no electricity, no water, no gas, no utilities. Dan Triplett said he wanted a severance pay. Dan Triplett told him no. They were just discussing the amount. Dan Triplett said that Brent Mack wanted $5,000, but Dan Triplett was willing to offer $1,000. And usually when you fire somebody, especially cash only, severance pay usually doesn't come in. But nonetheless, cash only with his help. And he was asked why severance. Brent Mack thought he was worth $25 an hour, and that back in the hole again. This is a lot of jumping around everywhere. I thought J.R. Cockley did a good job of lawyering on his feet, because this was a lot of information that they're ready for the prime suspect to testify, and you got to have your questions ready, and they were ready. But they are jumping all over the place. So I'm writing this as in order as it goes. So bear with me. We're jumping all over the place. In the hole, Dan Triplett said, Brent Mack, you're not going to leave me homeless, is what he said. He repeated that. Dan Triplett was asked, do you carry a gun in the truck? He says a .380 for a couple of years. He said there's dust on it probably. He said, that's not the gun that killed Brent Mack. And J.R. Cockley said, I'm glad you brought that up. Where's the gun? And we're like, oh, here we go. Where's the gun? Dan Triplett said, tossed it on the trailer. Toss the gun on the trailer. It's a long trailer that holds a backhoe. That's the trailer that he's talking about. He says it's a revolver. It was not bright. It was dark. Never saw the gun. Brent Mack ever have a gun. Never knew Brent Mack had a gun. This is what Dan Triplett is saying. He said it was in his left pocket and he pulled it out with his left hand. He was mad in the hole. He was hot and wanted to go home. He had a shovel in one hand. There was a rake down there and a measuring stick. It's a hole of about 10 by 10. I will go ahead and jump here a little bit. There's this conversation between District Attorney and Dan Triplett. They're talking about the gun. It turns out, I'm not sure where this comes up. I want to get this out as fast as possible. So when you do hear it come back up in notes, you'll know what this is talking about. So he said Dan Triplett identified the gun that Brent Mack allegedly pulled on him was a snub nose revolver. Probably had 5 shots on it. Remember, there was 4 that was Dan Triplett said was discharged. And I'm not the best of weapons guy, but so I pulled a picture of a snub nose revolver, not bright but dark, because I want to show you this. This photo that I'm getting ready to show you is not evidence. It's just a picture that I Googled and found and using for this. This is not evidence by any means. So this is for those non-firearm people, kind of like me a little bit. This is what a snub nose revolver looks like. And obviously we don't know the model, so it might not be a Smith & Wesson. This is just an example here. And I want to show you that because of some discussion that takes place with a gun this size. So Dan Triplett says Brent Mack was wearing work gloves, and when he's exhumed, he has work gloves on, and when he's taken to a medical examiner office, he has gloves on. So Brent, show you the photo here. So Brent Mack is wearing work gloves. Okay. And Dan Triplett was questioned on this. And so the District Attorney's Office said he's wearing gloves, and that he reaches in his left pocket with his work gloves on, pulls out the weapon, and puts his finger, or points the gun at him, has his finger there. And as you can see, that is a very small gun. A little bit later on, Detective or Investigator Woodward says that it would be difficult to do all that, but not impossible. To grab a gun with work gloves out of your pants and then to be able to hold it at somebody. Not impossible, but difficult is how it was phrased. Okay, it'll come up again here in a few moments, but I just want to kind of give you a heads up on that thought process. You're not going to leave me homeless. And I pulled up a 387 or 386. I can't remember what that gun was because that's what the bullet was said to be, or close to a 380. Dan Triplett said he carried a gun in the truck for a couple of years, dust on it. It was not the gun that Brent Mack, where's it at? Tossed it on the trailer. And so, if I remember right, Dan Triplett said it bounced off. When he took off, it just bounced off on the side of the road. Left pocket with his left hand. Brent Mack was mad in the hole. He was hot and wanted to go home. Dan Triplett kind of got a little irritated and said, "What would you do if someone pulled a gun on you?" He was asking the district attorney that question. And District J.R. Coughlin said, "A lot of people would freeze." Dan Triplett said he had an adrenaline rush. He said, Dan Triplett, pull the gun. You're not going to fire me and leave me homeless. Never been threatened before by employee, Dan Triplett said. Now remember, I'll give a little bit ahead of myself again. He said, you're not going to leave me homeless. Remember, Daniel Triplett, who has said many, many lies to police officers and to other family members of Brent Mack. Remember, Daniel Triplett said that he was going to go to Texas with his girlfriend. So he's not going to be homeless if he's going to go see his girlfriend in Texas. That's just another hole in the story, and I'm gonna keep an open mind. But there are a lot of holes and a lot of lies that we're about to find out by Dan Triplett this entire thing. So again, jumping to a lot of topics back and forth. J.R. Kalka to Dan Triplett. Were you faithful to your wife? Objection. That was Dan Triplett's attorney. Quickly objected to that. They go to Judge Corley for a sidebar, talk for a few seconds. They come back, and JR asked the question again, were you faithful to your wife? And Dan Triplett said, the question after the sidebar was, do you have any extra relationships with Trina Salazar? And Dan Triplett said no. Now remember, this, I think this came up in day 2, Trina Salazar, and I apologize because it wasn't, it felt weird talking about Trina Salazar, but it's an important part of this case, and it's just but Trina Salazar, I was going to pull the article up, but I'm already an hour into this. I need to hurry up. I apologize. Just so much information to get to. But Trina Salazar was killed on October 1st. Her and 2 other people were in a house they weren't supposed to be in. The homeowner had noticed people were in there. Homeowner came there, was kind of waiting, and he fired a shot, and it killed Trina Salazar on October 1st of 2021. So the extra relationships with Trina Salazar, Dan Triplett says no. He was asked, did you get text messages, intimate text messages from Trina Salazar? Dan Triplett says yes. Did she send you nude pics? Yes, she sent those. How many? Unknown. Dan Triplett was asked, will there be problems if Sharon Triplett found out? Dan Triplett said, there's always problems. And so he kind of went a little bit further to ask him that. Dan Triplett said, she would not be happy. And those text messages that were coming from her that we heard about on the witness stand, had a different contact name. And I can't remember. I would have to look back at my notes, but it had a different name and a date is how Trina Salazar's message would come. And so there's kind of a little silence there. And then out of nowhere, Dan Triplett from the witness stand says, "You going to ask me why she sent those?" And Judge Corley kind of put a stop to that pretty quick. Dan Triplett agreed with J.R. Caucus that worked for cash on some jobs. Yes. Brent Mack knew that some jobs were cash only. He was asked, "Do you carry a significant amount of cash on you?" Dan Triplett says yes. Did Brent Mack know that? He said no. Brent Mack was kicked out of the building in April of 2020, the one that he was living rent-free in downtown Guthrie. He was asked, did Brent Mack wear gloves? Dan Triplett said yes. He was wearing blue jeans and a white T-shirt, which the white T-shirt is shown on video, and obviously the medical examiner's office white T-shirt. So we go back to the work gloves to retrieve the gun so he was wearing work gloves to retrieve the gun and finger on the trigger. Dan Triplett says yes. He said there was 4 shots. He held up 4 fingers. He said the first bullet was on contact when Dan Triplett said he knocked it down. Hands in the air, both of them. So there's 4 hands in the air fighting for position, according to Dan Triplett. 2 more bullets are fired off. He's yanked down and wrenches the gun out, Dan Triplett said. Daniel Triplett said he hit his shoulder with Brent Mack's shoulder. And then he shot him in the back. Dan Triplett said he took karate years back. J.R. Cochran kind of asked him about any experience. Have you taken any self-defense classes? And he said no. He'd taken karate. And he said years back. And he said it was adrenaline. He said I had adrenaline. It was what made me do what I was able to do. And J.R. Cochran said, well, did Brent Mack have adrenaline? And then Daniel Triplett's response was, I assume so. Dan Triplett said adrenaline has that power. He said that when he shot Brent Mack, he grunted, and that about 5-10 seconds went down. Dan Triplett said, I freaked out, and that he confirmed that he did not call the Logan County Sheriff's Office. And then right then he began to bury Brent Mack like a dumbass. Quote, I did that. My bad. Like a dumbass, I did that. My bad. And real quickly, going back to the video, you see Brent Mack on the right side of the septic tank. You see Dan Triplett get off the backhoe and then goes over to his truck for a little bit. And then he circles back to where Brent Mack is at. I'm not saying either way. I'm just telling you that's what happened. Off the backhoe, went to his truck. Remember, Dan Triplett said he carries a gun, a .380 in his truck. But that was not the murder weapon that Dan Triplett said. But you do see him go to the truck. You see him circle around to Brent Mack and then into the hole. And then we know both sides of what is being said. Stay with me. I told you a lot of moving parts here. So now they're talking about Dan Triplett going down, both hands on the ladder. He tossed the gun on the trailer. He said it must have still been there when the siblings, the brothers and sister, arrived, the property owners, and they could have seen it. And JR asked him again, where is it now? And Dan Triplett said, bounced off on the side of the road. He is a guest. And then Dan Triplett was asked, where's his phone? He says, I have no idea. Dan Triplett said that Brent Mack put it in his duffel bag after lunch. They had lunch in the truck. Back to the hole. Dan Triplett said he rolled him in the hole and did not go through. And he was asked, did you go through his pockets? He said no. Remember, rolled him in the hole when they this will play a factor as well with another part of what Dan Triplett said was it drew a little heavy breathing in the courtroom, but he said he rolled him over. And remember when I believe when they found him, he was face down because they say they rolled him over. No, I'll see if I have that in my notes. I don't want to lie about that or misspeak on that. So hold on to that part. This is why I need to read my notes. Worked on the truck and put down on the sidewalk. Okay. So now we go back to the duffel bag. Remember the duffel bag was dropped off again, this is the photo I'm showing you is my photo that I took a couple days ago. This is not evidence, but this is the location where the duffel bag was found. Remember, Daniel Triplett said he had circled and was around Smith Gallo Funeral Home, which is just a little bit to the north of this picture. This is the old lumber yard here, and if you look beyond that fence in that area, that would be Missy's. But this is a little place here. Dan Triplett said so he was going over to check a headlight and a tail light, and he noticed Brent Mack's green Army duffel bag. And that is when he took that duffel bag. I'm finding my notes here real quick. Stay with me. I apologize. He said he put the duffel bag on the sidewalk. Now, remember, the homeowner said they found it in their yard on the other side, and I'm not sure exactly where, but they said over by the air conditioner. And that is when J.R. Kalkas said someone put the bag in the lady's yard. So basically, someone just put the bag from the sidewalk into the yard. Kind of sum all this up here in a second, but I'm just kind of give you the facts as we go along here. J.R. Clark kept asking about where's his phone? Did you take the SIM card out? Did you destroy it? Was it in the bag? And so he goes, what was it? 20, nothing. At the laundromat? No. Okay. So Dan Triplett was asked, were you surprised that Officer Fisher called you? Remember, she's the first officer to contact Dan Triplett. His reply, no opinion. That he was surprised that he was called. He said he began lying immediately on this story that he made up on the spot. Remember, he told Officer Fisher that he dropped Dan Triplett off, or that he's dropped Brent Mack off at the laundromat, gave him $1,000 severance pay, and that he was headed off to Texas. He said he made that up on the spot. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I'm trying not to go extremely long here. Again, a lot of information. Remember, the very first witness in this entire case was Brent Mack's daughter, asking about where's Brent Mack at. And remember the response that he gave her, that he fired him, dropped him off, gave him a severance pay. So Dan Triplett said he started making the story up immediately with the officer. Well, he's already told the story to the daughter. So this is the second time. He didn't start lying immediately. Another hole in Dan Triplett's story here. He told the daughter on Facebook Messenger, Dan unsent 2 messages. And he also admitted that he deleted a lot of Brent Mack's messages and some photos and all that good stuff. And he said he was trying to delete because his phone was maxed out. His iPhone 6S was maxed out. It said 99% full. So he deleted a lot of those text messages. And to be honest with you, I've had some phones in the past that I've had to do that as well. I wasn't, so I can see both sides, true, untrue. I don't know. A lot of lies been taken, so I don't even know what's true or not true anymore, but, or to believe right now. Again, 2 days before he talked to Fisher, he talked to the daughter, did not make all the lies. So Dan Triplett said, I didn't lie on everything. Dan Triplett, I shot him in self-defense. And J.R. Calkins, so he's willing to pull a gun on you when he's willing to do this, so he's willing to pull a gun and maybe shoot Dan Triplett when he's already said he's going to go to Texas. And Dan Triplett said he's been planning to go to Texas for 6 months. So Brent Mack's been talking about this forever. All right. Almost done, I promise. Again, it's just kind of going back and forth. J.R. Calkins is trying to find out. He kept saying, were you telling the truth then? Were you lying then? On all the testimony. A lot of wasted time and energy on the first couple of days of he drove this way or he did this and that. It was just a wasted time and energy because a lot of that was lied by Dan Triplett. Although, I talked about it yesterday in that 65-minute audio video, Mark Bruning was dead on. He goes, hey, if he's missing, let us know. If it was self-defense, let us know. And he had 2 opportunities. Mark Bruning asked him a couple times about self-defense. Hey, I get it. Stuff like that happens. Just let us know. Where is he at? And we can work on that. And that comes up here. JR said, when did you decide to tell the truth? You got arrested. Did you ever start thinking about telling the truth? Mark Bruning gave you a couple of opportunities to say it was self-defense. Just tell us. Thought about the truth. Dan Triplett said he was too embarrassed to tell the truth. Would not look good because of his reputation. And JR asking your reputation, lying, shooting, and burying Brent Mack. Daniel Triplett said, I knew I was going to get found out. He said during the interview with Mark Bruning and Agent Woodward that he was shaking and seeing stars a quarter way through the interview because if he doesn't eat, he gets lightheaded and could pass out if he doesn't eat fast enough. He said, remember the Dollar General video? Did you lie about going to Dollar General? And Dan Triplett said, no, I just had the wrong day. Misled police on the date in Crescent. The first time that Mark Bruning asked about it on September 30th. So Dan Triplett was not straightforward with police throughout this entire process. He still thought it was the same job. He still thought that the Mulhall job was in Crescent. Again, you would like to believe that, but there's been so many lies. It's just what's lie and what is not a lie anymore. I don't know addresses without looking. Did Brent Mack accuse you of having an affair with the homeowner, the property owner, girlfriend? ? Yes. How many times? Only one time. How many times? One text message deleted and deleted about a month before. Do you have a girlfriend? Dan Triplett says no. Never came up in person. October 13th warrant. He said he unlocked his cell phone 3 times during that warrant. Were you concerned that police were going to find out? He couldn't. He kind of paused and said, "What's the question?" And he said, "I'm not sure." They walked in on document search. They said, "Where's the documents at?" And he pointed toward the kitchen table. Never mentioned the truck, but Dan Triplett said there was 18. I think he was being a little bit more than 8. I think it was more 7 or 8, according to earlier testimony. But he said there was 18, and that he said the first place they went to was the truck. So that's why he didn't mention anything about documents being in the truck. said, when did you find out Brent Mack when did you find out about this whole deal? And Dan Triplett said when he was arrested on that October night. And Daniel Triplett said he did not know the address of the Mulhall, but he said he probably could drive out there. Could you have told police? Yes. He said, did you need to come clean when you were arrested? They said, why didn't you just come clean when you got arrested? And he said Sharon, his wife, had just gotten the lawyer, so he didn't say any more. Did you think you would get away with it? He said, thought I would get caught. Self-defense was fine. He said he escaped the alleged altercation without any injuries. Again, they're talking about above the hand, 6 feet down on the west side, mounds of dirt covering the camera angle. Okay, here's another interesting part here. How did you know Brent Mack was dead? He said he checked his pulse immediately. When he did that, he was asked, how did you check his pulse? And Dan Triplett put 2 fingers on his neck. And so earlier testimony, they were trying to figure out, did he go straight down, face down, or was he face up? And Dan Triplett at the time said he couldn't remember. He said he put 2 fingers and that he couldn't feel a pulse. And JR said, would you have called for an ambulance if he was still alive? I did not write my answer, but he said he would have called for an ambulance. I did not write that down, but I remember him saying he would call for an ambulance if he was still alive. But he did not call the sheriff's office. He said, I didn't write this down, but I do remember. I would have called the ambulance, and JR called, don't you think police would investigate if an ambulance was called out there? And Dan Triplett said, no. Pointed to Hunter's neck with 2 fingers. Couldn't remember if he was up or down. Eyes was graded over, was the word they used, color changed, and that he was dead. And so that was Dan Triplett's testimony. And I, again, if you're so confused, jumping back and forth, that is exactly how I felt in the courtroom today. I don't know if it was just me or jurors or everyone in the gallery. It was just a lot of moving parts, a lot of back and forth, covering different topics at 3, 4, 5 different times throughout this deal. So J.R. Coughlin is done with this, and they asked, is there any redirect? And Triplett's attorney said no redirect. And that was Dan Triplett's testimony from the witness stand. Jesse McCracken was the next witness to be called, and he wasn't on there very long. He's the stepbrother of Daniel Triplett, former Guthrie police officer, U.S. Marshal, Logan County Sheriff's Office. He said Dan Triplett was truthful and honest to him, and several people would feel the same way about Dan Triplett in the community, and that was it. So basically a real brief character witness for him. And then the defense rests at 4:10 p.m., and so then the state had a rebuttal witness, which was Kevin Woodward. Kevin Woodward was asked by J.R. Coughlin. He was in and out of the hole multiple times. Dan Triplett goes to his truck before going to the hole. Remember, got off the back hole, went to his truck, went over to Brent Mack. Brent Mack goes into the hole. Dan Triplett goes into the hole. After watching the video many, many times, Kevin Woodward says he never sees any motion or movement or hands in the hole. Never sees any motion or movement. And that's when they start talking about the snub nose gun that we talked about a little bit. He said very difficult to retrieve with gloves. And then on cross redirect, he said it's not impossible, but difficult. And then both parties rested at 4:17 p.m. So, oh goodness, hour 23. It's amazing. I knew it'd be a little bit longer than normal, but just a lot of information. And I was dreading this podcast the entire night because I was wanting to. It was so much information to write down, and I was able to get most of it, but just not what I wanted to do because I knew I had to relay this information to you guys, and I was nervous the entire day that how it would come across. So I hope it's not too confusing. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take those now, to maybe try to clear all this up. So again, closing arguments and all that stuff will come on Tuesday. I think the motive, we've already heard Dan Triplett why we know Brent Mack, why on Dan Triplett's side of the story is that Brent Mack pulled a gun on him. He said some stuff, and in self-defense, he shot him in the back. We know that side. But why would Dan Triplett, on the other side, why would Dan Triplett kill Brent Mack? Was it about the text messages that Brent Mack knew? Was it the affairs that Brent Mack knew? Was Brent Mack going to say something to somebody? Could that be a motive? That's the piece. That's the 2 or 3 pieces throughout this entire trial that I picked up on that could be a motive. Will that come all together in the closing arguments? It could. It could. That could be the reason why Dan Triplett killed Brent Mack. On that side of it, remember, Dan Triplett's side was in self-defense. So we have 2 sides, 2 reasons why Brent Mack was shot. And now jurors have got to decide that. I can tell you jurors were, at the beginning of Dan Triplett's testimony, they were up in their chair. They were really into it. A few of them, as it went on and on and on, kind of leaned back and kind of got a little bit more comfortable. A couple of jurors were looking in the gallery, making eye contact with people after certain comments. I won't go any further than that, but yeah, very, very interesting. Question here. It's a lot easier if you put a Q or a question in front of it, and I can go through my comments here real quick. It's a lot easier to find that. P. Morgan, you may have said it earlier. I missed the beginning, but is Brent Mack left-handed? I was asked, not sure. That was not given. But he said he pulled it out in left hand. There was a shovel in the right hand. Good question. It was brought up. No one seems to know that answer. I did not talk to the family, to either family. I do that on purpose. I know it's an emotional deal, and Oklahoma City Media Television talked to them, and that's right, every right to if they want to talk. Triplett family is not talking. Members of Brent Mack's family are talking, and there's no wrong way, but I've not done any of that. I don't want, and the reason why I don't put them in a weird spot where they say something and then it's used. It's a weird process. I'm kind of paranoid that way, so. Question here. Does metallurgical, that's a big word for me. I'm sorry, Pat Jenkins. Comparison exists between the bullet that killed Mack and other ammo found in Triplett's possession. That came out yesterday, Pat Jenkins. 6 firearms from Dan Triplett's house and vehicles were taken off to try to match that bullet, and those firearms did not match that bullet, which Dan Triplett said Brent Mack produced a gun, and that gun got tossed on the trailer. So did it get tossed on a trailer? Did it get dumped somewhere? Is it in a ground somewhere? Is on the side of a road? Don't have a weapon. And that was clear. We thought that, after the preliminary hearing several months ago, no motive. This is Dan Triplett's attorney. No motive, no weapon. Those were the 2 things that he said. And we're starting to get an idea of the motive with evidence. And of course, the state's not going to give that type of information in a preliminary hearing where it takes very little evidence to say there was a crime committed and a trial will be heard. So they're not going to say that. But there's been 3 or 4 spots throughout this trial about that motive. And now we'll see if the state brings that together, why they believe Dan Triplett killed Brent Mack. And I think it's going to be because Brent Mack had information on Dan Triplett. That's just my opinion. That's why it's on Second Banana Media podcast and not Guthrie News Page. These are my opinions, and that's why I like to separate these two, because News Page is for news. This is for opinions. So that's why the Second Banana Media, I've had people ask me, Second Banana Media? Hannah says, really didn't think Trina would come up, but oh my goodness, it did come to light. And yeah, I have a hard time talking about because she passed, but it is a big part of this story. It is a big part of this story. Chris Mallow has been in the courtroom every single day, taking notes. His notes are, by the way, his notes are a lot better than mine. He has very good penmanship. His book is a lot smaller than mine. His pen is shinier than mine. But he says a complete tactical withdrawal by the defense after Triplett's testimony. Hannah, I appreciate that. She says you're doing amazing explaining this whole mess and appreciate this so much. I hope so. I was just dreading this video the entire day because it's so important to relay the information correctly. And I feel like I did a good job. It's just very confusing. A lot of moving parts in this deal here. So thank you. Pat Jenkins. I understand that the coroner's first indication of Mack's body was his belt buckle. Correct. How is that possible if Mack was buried face down? Oh, it cut off. Let me see if I can find Pat's here. How was Mack buried down? Am I mistaken? I need to look through my notes, but I thought, yes. Pat, I'm glad you said that. Without looking at my notes, I thought he was face down because I remember they said I know they rolled him over. I think they rolled him over. I need to confirm that. I need to go through my notes. I won't bore anybody, me reading through a bunch of notes because I got almost 30, 40 pages of notes right now. So I won't do that. Beverly Thompson, good question. Where's the $1,000? That was obviously made up. That was one of the lies. There was never $1,000. A lot of conversation. It was not even words $1,000. Is why would a severance package be offered if you're firing Brent Mack? And he said he gave $1,000 to Brent Mack's sister or Brent Mack's daughter. He gave $1,000 to multiple police officers. Obviously, that's not true. Obviously, Brent Mack was not dropped off at the laundromat. Brent Mack was buried by Dan Triplett. He admit that. He says self-defense. He goes, I'm guilty of that. Which I think I said it on day 2 of the trial in this conversation was, I said, is Daniel Triplett going to want to get a not guilty verdict in a self-defense type deal? I did bury him. So for that charge for desecration of a body is 0 to 7 years in prison. So find me not guilty of first degree murder because it was self-defense. I am guilty of desecration. Give me 5 years, I guess 7 years at the max. Give me time credit and I'm out of jail in 5 years. That is the best case scenario for Daniel Triplett if you believe his side. And I'm not, it has holes in it. It's up to the jurors. We have all of our opinions. Facebook is full of them as well. But it comes down to those 12 jurors. And they're hearing the same information that I'm hearing that I'm relaying to you. Okay? For some people, it is not even close to being truthful. And there's a lot of holes in Dan Triplett. I agree. There are a lot of holes in this case given by Dan Triplett. But, again, there's 12 jurors. If one of them says guilty, if one of them says not guilty, it's a hung jury. Triplett goes back to jail for more time until another trial date is brought up and a new jury is seated and a new trial would begin. Pam's question about the gun. Let's see here. Pam. Good to see Miss Pam. She says, really, going to toss a murder weapon with your fingerprints on a trailer and drive off. He said he was freaked out and totally forgot about the gun. I don't know if I said that, but he said he totally forgot about the gun. Kaylin Swanger. Can you see Kaylin? Is a motive required to bring back a murder one charge, or can they charge him without that? Good question. Well, I can tell you, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I can tell you if there is another trial, I think Brent Mack's family would not go for anything lesser than murder one. If there is a second trial, I cannot see the family wanting anything less than murder one. They were, they no outbursts. You can just tell they were frustrated, not happy. They were somewhat laughing at Dan Triplett, that he was a liar. One of them told me he's a liar. That's not even close. That's his only way to try to get out of this. So I would say the family would not let anything less go for that. Oh, she meant convict, not charge. Is a motive required to bring back a murder one convict, or can they charge him without that? I think I just asked that. So I answered that. Yes, motive isn't a requirement. Kaylin says the News Leader, which is the printed newspaper here in Guthrie, it is separate from Guthrie News Page. It's very confusing. Guthrie News Leader, Guthrie News Page. I should have named it something different a long time ago. But anyway, she says the printed paper reported that the jury seemed to believe Triplett less as his testimony went on. Do you agree? Yeah, and I mentioned that earlier. That they were, when they said first witness, Daniel Joseph Triplett, I was like, whoa, here we go. This never happens on TV trials. It never happens in trials in Logan County. Not very many of those talk. And yes, they were very, like I was, very leaning forward. I was writing every single word down as fast as I could, man. This is unheard of. We're finally getting to hear the other side. I didn't think we'd hear the other side. Here we are. I'm writing it right. And then as we go on and you hear kind of a repeat of the same answers, and he's pausing, when there's a good question, he'll say, good question, or I don't know. Not answering the questions, the ones that you would really like to hear. And so, yeah, even I found myself, okay, I'm not writing down every single thing like I were earlier. And I think I saw that, and I mentioned that earlier. The jurors did kind of lean back, get a little bit more comfortable. And again, a couple of jurors looked over in the gallery and was like, I don't want to say, because that's just me assuming what they're thinking. I don't need to do that. You don't do that in court. You don't do that in court. So, hour 36, and I probably, a lot of people probably already turned this off, won't watch this entire deal, but it's always a good time to start asking questions. And if I go off here and you want to ask questions, go ahead and put that in the comments, and I'll try to answer those. I'll try to do another one of these on the weekends, just kind of get maybe Sunday or Monday, trying to answer a lot of people's questions, because a lot of people don't watch the entire deal or can't watch all of them. So Amy asked, what was his attitude? A couple of different attitudes. Sometimes he confronted the district attorney's office a few times. He asked questions a few times. He seemed to get angry a few times, but he paused a few times before answering questions. But overall, I thought he answered all the questions that were offered him. Were they truthful? There's so many holes in the story. It's kind of hard to tell. So, and that's what J.R. Cochlear, the attorney, when he says something, well, is that true? I mean, when you lied about it earlier, is it still true? And, some things were true, some things were not true. So, all right. Hopefully that answers a lot of things. Chris Mallow. Yeah. Chris Mallow says he got he got trapped a few times and knew it. And that's what I mean by pauses. He did pause. A question was asked, and it was just that long stare, that 1,000-yard stare. You're like, is he going to answer? Is he thinking of an answer? Is he trying to remember what he said? Trying to get a story as there were. what Chris said, he was trapped a few times. That's a good point. Miss Pam, Dan's own words, Brent was going to Texas to a girlfriend, so Brent didn't think he was going to be homeless. Exactly right. He told Brent Mack's daughter that. He told multiple police officers that he was going to Amarillo, Texas to be with his girlfriend. And he talked to his girlfriend and text messenger that day, so they were still talking and had a good relationship. He was not going to be homeless. He was not going to be homeless. The other side, to be fair on that, Dan Triplett said he had talked about going to Texas for 6 months. So just to be fair to put that in there, that's what he did say that. You know, that's kind of like, I'm going to clean out the garage. I'm going to clean out the garage. And it's been a while since I've cleaned out the garage, but I keep saying I'm going to clean out the garage. So maybe that's Dan Triplett's side of the things as well. Thank you, Chris. Great summary. Boy, I tried. I was, and you got to put this in words. You got to type this out and put this in words. He said there was so much that there was so much information. It was just in and out of different topics, different times. Oh, let's go back to this and let's talk about this. So, yes, a lot of information. First day I had 6 notes. Day one of the trial I had 6 notes, 6 pages of notes. Day 2, another 6 pages of notes. Today I think I had 12 pages of notes. All right, looks like all the questions, all that is starting to dwindle down, and hopefully I did not confuse everybody. And thank you for all the great comments. I appreciate that. Hopefully everyone has a good 89er week. And I will try to come back Sunday, Monday, somewhere in that time frame as we get set for Tuesdays. On Tuesday, jury instructions. There will be closing arguments for both sides. And then the jurors will go upstairs and to deliberate. And then we'll see if they come back with a guilty or not guilty first-degree murder charge. Remember, Dan Triplett has admitted that he shot Brent Mack in self-defense, but has admitted to lying to law enforcement and desecrating, hiding the body of Brent Mack. So he's already pleaded guilty to that, which carries 0 to 7 years. And he would be, obviously, will take that over, obviously, the biggest charge, first-degree murder. Okay, Pat Jenkins, a couple more have come in. Thank you, guys. Comment, I am from Guthrie. My nephew is juror number 9. He is tight-lipped and obeying the judge, so I'm following you from Las Vegas. Great. Yes, Pat, do juror number 9 a huge favor and do not put him in that spot or her in that spot to discuss this. It's a very, very important. Now, there's 4 days that these jurors will be away from court. And it is very, very important that jurors do not talk, do not research, do not go to places. They are told that every single day not to do that. So I asked you, do not put that juror in that spot. I do not know any of the jurors, and that's the way I would want to have that. Not in the past, I've known them, and I'm even afraid to make eye contact with people that I know in the hallway or in the courtroom. I look over that. I don't want to look because I don't want that weird spot, and I don't want a judge talking to me. So, yeah. But I'm glad the internet works from Guthrie to Las Vegas. That's cool. Looks like Las Vegas is going to get the Oakland A's baseball team there, so that's cool. Marvin D asked, you may have said this already, but did they find other rounds in the hole, or was there just one shot? Great question. That was never asked of any law enforcement officer. And I've seen pictures at the site when they went there on October 21st, and there was OSBI, Sheriff's Office, Guthrie Police Department. There was tons and tons of investigators, and they didn't bump into a gun that perhaps fell off a trailer, and they didn't mention any other thing about any casings found in the hole. But there was 4 total shots according to Dan Triplett, including one that was found in the chest cavity of Brent Mack. He said the first Dan Triplett said that Brent Mack pulled out with his work gloves the gun, put his finger on the trigger, that he knocked it down. When he knocked it down, that was the first bullet taken. Then there was a fight with both hands above their heads, that 2 more shots were fired off. And then the 4th shot into Brent Mack's back. And he was asked, so is the 5th bullet still in the chamber? And I believe Dan Triplett said, I would assume so. So yeah, if there was casings found, that would be in the error report. It would have been mentioned 25 times, I think, in this case. If there was casings found, I think that would be a huge part of this investigation, and there's simply none there. So that tells you, was that part made up? That's what the jurors got to decide. Miss Beverly Thompson, good to see Miss Bev. Question, if self-defense, but he was shot in the back, how is that self-defense? That is probably the number one question I hear over and over and over, is if what Dan Triplett said was true, that he hit shoulder to shoulder, spun Brent Mack, and was able to get the gun away. Now, if that's the case, Dan Triplett has the gun, and Brent Mack does not have a gun. So I mean, do you hold him at gunpoint and say, back up, or I'm going to shoot, and get up the ladder and call the sheriff's office? That's what I think most people would do. Doesn't mean it happened this time, but I would think the majority of the people would do that. If you're put in that spot, it could be totally different. But Brent Mack shot in the back, and so there's not much of a threat with someone's back to you, and this comes up in a lot of cases. However you want to look at it. Okay, next question. Amy Wheeler asks, how did Dan, who's 6 feet tall, push Brent with his shoulder, who's 6'4" inches tall, and force him to turn around and it cut off here, so I got to go, and somewhat bend over and then shoot him in the back? How is this possible? Amy, that was brought up, and if you were to ask Dan Triplett that question, he would say adrenaline. Adrenaline would make you do that. That would be his answer. It was said that Brent Mack was probably a little bit stronger, a little bit taller. He was obviously 15, 18 years younger than Dan Triplett. Not that that matters in some cases, but Brent Mack was a pretty big guy. But if you were to ask that question to Dan Triplett, he would say adrenaline, which the Assistant District Attorney, J.R. Cockla, who has done a great job today. He lawyered on his feet, did a good job. There was never any hesitation. He stood up. Now, he bounced around, but I think he did that on purpose, just to see if Dan Triplett's story would change. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not talking to JR. It would be weird me talking to him, and I don't want to make anything weird with him or Triplett's attorney, Mr. Wallace, as well. All right, next question. I love questions a whole lot more because it's what you guys are wanting to hear, and it's maybe something that I'm not thinking of, so I appreciate these questions. It really does help. He says, defense should have produced a witness that could testify as to the make, model of the gun that Dan Triplett is known to carry in his car. Yes, Dan Triplett says he has it in his in a cubby hole in his truck underneath the console, and that he said he's never gotten it out. In fact, he said it has dust on it. But he also said that was not the gun that was used. So Dan Triplett said that the gun was used that was produced by Brent Mack, is what Dan Triplett would say. Another question or comment, or a witness that can testify that the victim owned and carried a gun that fit the description that Triplett described in court. Yeah. I don't know if that was true. I don't know who would be able to describe that. If the attorneys knew somebody, I certainly think that would be the case. Or find a spent bullet in the hole that can corroborate Dan Triplett's testimony. Without that, I believe Dan Triplett is in deep trouble. Yeah, there's no casings. I think if there was casings, it would be all over court testimony, being all over police reports. I've looked at both. I've listened to all of it. There's not a casing to be found. Amy Wheeler, if I'm not mistaken, he was an athlete as well. Don't know that part, Amy. Could be. I don't know. It hasn't come up. And I personally did not know Brent Mack. I know a few of his family members. I see him in court every single day. But no, I'm not sure about that. Blue Jay Hayes. I like Blue Jay Hayes. I like the name. I'll have to look you up who you are. Blue Jay Hayes. It was a revolver. There's no casings ejected like a 9mm. There you go. I'm far from a gun person. So, but wouldn't there be not necessarily casings, but maybe bullets around? Not casings, but bullets. So maybe I should say bullets instead of casings. So trust me, I do not know guns. I know about guns. I'm not a firearm specialist. There you go. I do know what a 9mm and a 40 and a 45 AR-15. Don't get me lying any further than that. So, but yes, thank you for helping me with that. So if not casings, then maybe bullets. Regardless, there was nothing else found bullets wise at the scene or any that was reported. Hour 50. Holy smokes. You guys are awesome for staying this long. I appreciate that. And again, I like all these questions a lot easier. So it brings up great discussion points. So thank you for that. We'll just go a few more minutes here. If you have anything, I know you're probably wanting to type it in there. Maybe you're embarrassed to. There's no dumb question. Trust me, I've already showed you my great firearm knowledge and analysis. So. If you prefer not to watch these and you'd rather listen to these, I am uploading these on the podcast platform, audio only, Apple, Google, Spotify. So if you rather listen to them in your free time instead of having to watch videos, I'll offer that here in a little point. Marvin D. Good point. Blue Jay Hayes should be bullets in that hole somewhere, and surely they did a metal detector. Thanks, Chris. This is great. Yeah. And I wonder if, of course, when investigators go to a crime scene, they try to do everything. Thousands of pictures. I'm sure they canvass the area for looking for any evidence whatsoever. But if they're on the ground with all those law enforcement officers at that septic tank, if there was a bullet to be found, I think they would have found it. Now, if it shoots in the air, how far does it travel? Does it travel several hundred yards away? 50 yards? Who knows? So, if that part is true. So far, the majority of the people that I have spoke with outside of this case, no one in the courtroom, but a lot of people think Dan Triplett's story has a lot of holes in it. Untruthful in a lot of ways. And so you're untruthful with everybody for weeks and a month. Yeah, about a full month, a little more than that. Lie. And now Dan Triplett brings this up in court. And now expecting jurors to believe this story. Don't believe all the lies I told you earlier. I admitted to those, but now I'm telling the truth. And that's what jurors got to decide. Is he now telling the truth, or is this another made-up story? That's what 12 jurors will ultimately decide. I'll leave you with this note. I've already said it once. If there's any questions, I'll wrap it up here. No court on Friday. 89ers has the courthouse closed. Logan County offices closed. Judge Corley has his felony docket. It's a huge docket every month. That is usually on Fridays. With the courthouse closed on Friday, That felony docket has now been moved to Monday, and so he'll have a big docket, and a docket is for updates on people's criminal court appearances for those who are on bond or in jail or following up on their cases. So that's why the jury will come. The trial will begin back on Tuesday at 9 a.m. with jury instructions, closing arguments by the state and the defense, and then they will be excused upstairs to deliberate. And we'll see how long it takes for them to come back with a verdict. If it's 2 hours or less, it's not a good sign for Dan Triplett, because 2 hours or less usually means guilty. Not every time, but I've been through many of these processes. If it's 2 hours or less, it's not a good sign for the defendant. If it goes longer and longer and longer, that's a good sign for the defendant, because somebody, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 11 jurors are undecided. There might be just one juror that cannot go with the other group. There's been a lot of times, and I've been to trials where all 12 jurors could not come to an agreement, and it's a hung jury. Of course, we all know about the Deputy Wade trial. It was quick on the guilty of the killing of Deputy Wade, but the penalty phase took a while, and one juror said no to the death penalty. Therefore, there was no death penalty granted, and that's why the suspect is in prison for the rest of his life, because one juror could not come up with that. So we will see how that comes about next week. So it might all wrap up on Tuesday. I think it will. Again, the judge will want to keep that jury together as long as possible and not have them go out after deliberating on that. So, Jonathan, good to hear from you. What about GSR, gunshot residue on the hands or gloves? Never came up. The only time it came up a little bit was maybe some residue on the body of Brent Mack, but due to decomposing of the body, it wasn't really able to determine that. Gunshot wound, hesitant hands or gloves. I don't think it was brought up in court if Dan Triplett was wearing gloves or not. But gunshot residue has not come up in the testimony from the witness stand. Good question, Vicky. What kind of gloves was Brent Mack wearing? Let's address that first. That was asked by J.R. Cochla, asking that question, and Dan Triplett kind of thought about it for a little bit, and he said they were synthetic gloves. So, and they had the picture. They had the picture of the work gloves that all the jurors got to see. People in the gallery did not see those pictures. I wish they would, when they produce those. In trials past, they put them on a projector so the entire courtroom can see it. We have not been able to see any evidence up close. We've not been able to look at it. But more importantly, the jurors have. So the jurors were able to see those gloves exactly how they were. You know, my gloves that I have are big, and they take up almost double my finger. I don't know if my gloves are too big, and they should be a little bit tighter fit. I don't know, but it's hard for me. Like my cooking gloves are hard to. My cooking gloves, my work gloves would not fit into this revolver. This is not the actual gun. This is just the photo that I found off the internet. But that's how big that gun is, a snub nose revolver. So it would be hard for me to put my work gloves, to trust my work gloves to go into my left pocket, to pull it out, and to be able to get my finger in there. That would be extremely difficult for me. But if Dan Triplett's side of the story is true, then it would be possible. And OSBI Special Agent Woodward said, it's not impossible, but difficult. And I think I cut off the rest of your question. Let me see what that was. Vicky. Her other question, wouldn't it have been hard to fire a gun with work gloves on? was there gun residue on the gloves? And it never came up if there was residue on the gloves. They do have the gloves still, obviously in evidence, but that was not brought up. And I don't know if Dan Triplett was wearing gloves or not. So I don't know if there wouldn't be residue on Brent Mack's gloves. Obviously, it'd be too late to get Dan Triplett's hand, if there's any residue on Dan Triplett's hands. Okay. Final 30 seconds to get your question in. We're going to end this right at 2 hours. So final time, I said that a few minutes ago, but we'll just make this an even 2 hour show here, and we'll get out of here. And I appreciate all the great comments. You guys are super nice. And hopefully, although I wish the trial was able to go tomorrow and we can all be done with it for the weekend, but it'll be nice to kind of get away for a little bit and get ready for the big Tuesday. Okay. No other comments, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out for this long. I'm sure many people got out of here way before now, but thank you for all the great questions. It really makes things a lot easier to discuss with you guys, and continue to ask those questions on Facebook or YouTube. I'd be glad to answer those when I can. Have a great 89ers weekend, and have a fun day at the parade on Saturday. We'll broadcast that live on Guthrie News page. So if you're in Las Vegas, you'll be able to see that on Guthrie News page. Have a great weekend, everybody.